If I may, we will continue where we left off the other day when we met here. We were saying how important it is that there should be a fundamental change in the human psyche. We were saying that this change can only come about through complete freedom. That word, freedom, is a most dangerous word unless we understand completely and absolutely what it means. Not only according to the dictionary meaning, but also learn the full implications of that word. Because most of us use that word according to our peculiar tendency, according to our fancy, or politically. But we are going to use that word neither politically nor circumstantially, but rather go into the meaning of it psychologically, inwardly. And before we go into it, we have to also to understand the meaning of the word learn. As we said the other day, we are going to learn together, communicate together, which means partake, share together. And learning is a part of this. Not that you are going to learn from the speaker, but learn by observing, using the speaker as a mirror to observe your own movement of thought, of feeling, of your own psyche, your own psychology. So there is no authority involved in this at all, though the speaker, unfortunately, has to sit on a platform because it's convenient. But that position does not give him any authority whatsoever. So we can brush that aside completely and consider the question of learning, not from another, not from the speaker, but using the speaker to learn about oneself. And to learn, there must be freedom. There must be a great deal of curiosity. And there must be naturally intensity, passion, and an immediacy. You cannot learn if there is no passion, energy to find out. And it implies freedom. If there is any kind of prejudice, any bias, of like or dislike, of condemnation, as we were saying the other day, then one cannot possibly learn, only distorts what one observes. So, as we are going to talk about something which needs considerable investigation, exploration together, one must be very clear from the very beginning that you are not learning from the speaker anything at all. You are learning from observing your own psyche, your own self, whatever it is. So there is no question of authority here whatsoever. The word discipline means to learn from another, from a man who knows and you are supposed not to know. So you learn from another. The word discipline implies that. But here, we are using the word discipline not as learning from another, but the observation of oneself demands the discipline which is not suppression, imitation, or conformity, or even adjustment, but actually observe, and that very observation is an act of discipline, which is learning through observation. Please do bear this in mind as we are talking this evening, that we are together going to learn, and that very act of learning is its own discipline, in the sense you have to give a great deal of attention. You have to have a great energy, intensity, and the immediacy of action. Because we're going to talk about fear. And in going to that, we have to consider a great many things, because fear is a very complex business. Unless the mind is completely, absolutely free from fear, every form of action brings about more mischief, more misery, more confusion. So we are going to inquire together the implication of fear, and whether it is at all possible to completely be free of it. Not tomorrow, not at some future date, but actually as you leave this hall, so that the burden and the darkness and the misery, the corruption of fear no longer exists. You know this, to understand this, you have to understand also the idea of gradualness. That is gradually getting rid of fear. There is no such thing of gradually getting rid of fear. Either you completely are free of it or not at all. There is no gradualness, which implies time. Time, not only in the chronological sense of that word, but also in the psychological sense. Time is the very essence of fear, as we shall point out presently. So, in understanding and be freeing of fear, the idea, the conditioning in which one is brought up, the idea to do it gradually, slowly, eventually, must completely come to an end. And that's going to be our first difficulty. Please, if I may point out again, this is not a lecture. It's like two people, friendly, affectionate, inquiring together into a very difficult problem. Because man has lived with fear. He has accepted it. It is part of his life. And we are inquiring into the possibility, or rather, the impossibility of ending fear. You know, what is possible is already done, is already finished. And if it is possible, you can do it. But what is impossible becomes possible only when you understand that there is no tomorrow at all, psychologically speaking. Here we are confronted with an extraordinary problem of fear. And man apparently has never been able to be rid of it completely. Not only physically, but inwardly, psychologically. He's never done it. He's always escaped from it through various forms of entertainment, religious and otherwise. And the escapes have been an avoidance of what is. And what we are concerned with is the impossibility of being free from it completely. Therefore, what is impossible becomes possible. First of all, what is actually fear? There is not only physical fear, but also various subtle forms of psychological fears, hidden and open. The physical fears can be understood comparatively easily. But the psychological fears becomes much more complex. And to understand it, there must be freedom to inquire, not an opinion, not dialectical inquiry into the truth of the possibility of ending fear. So first, let us go into this question of physical fear, which naturally affects the psyche, psychosomatic fears. When you meet danger of any kind, there is instant response, physical response. Is that fear? Please, we are inquiring together. You're not learning from me. We are together learning. Therefore, you have to pay a great deal of attention. Because it's no good attending a gathering of this kind and going away with a few set of ideas or formulas. That doesn't free the mind from fear. But what does free the mind completely and absolutely? The mind of fear is to understand it totally, completely. Now, not tomorrow. It's like seeing something wholly, completely. And what you see, you understand. Then it's yours and nobody else's. So there is physical fears, like meeting danger, meeting a precipice, a wild animal, or the fear of falling ill again, having had an illness in the past, the pain of it, the misery of it, and the fear of it happening again. The ordinary physical fears, meeting danger and the response to that danger. Is it fear or is it intelligence? Please, you are inquiring. You are going to find out. You meet an animal, a snake, and you respond immediately. That response is the past conditioning which says, be careful. And your whole body, your whole psychosomatic response is immediate. Though it is conditioned, it is the result of the past where you have been told that it is, the animal is dangerous. Be careful. Be careful of the car, be careful of the bus, be careful of the precipice, and so on. Any form of danger, meeting it, is it fear or the necessity of self-preservation? and therefore intelligence. Then there is the fear of having this pain, physical pain again. You have had physical pain of some kind or another, and you don't want it again. And so you're afraid that it might happen. Right? Now what has taken place there? Is that intelligence? Or is it an action of thought which is the response of memory of having had pain and fearing that it might happen again? Is this clear? That thought produces fear. Right? We'll go into it. You will see it. And there are the various forms of psychological fears. Fear of death, fear of your wife or your husband, fear of society, fear of not being respectable, fear of what people might say, fear of darkness, and so on. So many forms of fear. We cannot obviously go into the many forms of fears. That would take too long, and that would be wholly unnecessary. Now, before we go into this question of fear, psychological fears, we have to understand something very clearly. We are not analyzing. Analysis has nothing whatsoever to do with observation, with seeing. In analysis, there is always the analyzer and the thing analyzed. The analyzer is a fragment of the many other fragments of which we are as human beings. One fragment assumes the authority of the analyzer and begins to analyze. Now, what is involved in that? The analyzer is the sensor, is the knower, is the entity who assumes that he has knowledge. And therefore, he has the authority to analyze. And when he does analyze, unless he analyzes completely, truly, without any distortion, his analysis has no value at all. Right? Please do understand this very carefully, because we are not analyzing. The speaker does not maintain the necessity of analysis whatsoever at any time. It's rather a bitter pill to swallow, but listen to it. Because most of you either have been analyzed or going to be analyzed or have studied what analysis is. Analysis implies not only the analyzer separate from the analyzed. Is that a fact? Then analysis implies time. Gradually you have to analyze bit by bit the whole series of fragments of which you are. And that involves years. And when you analyze, the mind must be absolutely clear and free to analyze. Otherwise, if there is any form of distortion, the analysis has no value. So those two things are involved. The analyzer, a part of the fragment, who separates himself from the rest of the other fragments and says, I am going to analyze. And analysis implies also time, day after day, in looking, criticizing, condemning, judging, evaluating, remembering. Analysis also implies the whole drama of dreams. And one never asks if it is necessary to dream at all. Though all the psychologists say you must. Otherwise you go mad. All these things are involved in analysis. So, the first thing is, who is the analyzer? Part of yourself, part of your mind. And he is going to examine the other parts. And he is the result of the past experience, past knowledge, past evaluations. He is the center from which he is going to examine. Right? We are not agreeing or disagreeing, we are examining. And he becomes, the analyzer, becomes the center from which to observe. Has that center any truth, any validity? Because all of us function from a center. And what is that center? That center is a form of fear, anxiety, greed, pleasure, despair, hope, dependency, ambition, greed, comparison, all that. That is the center from which we think and act. This is a fact, not a supposition, not a theory, not a formula, but this is an absolute, observable, daily fact. And in that center, there are very many fragments. And one of the fragments becomes the analyzer, which is so absurd. Because the analyzer is the analyzed. You must understand this completely, otherwise we won't be able to understand when we go into the question of fear much more deeply. And you have to understand it completely. Because when you leave this hall, you must be free of it. So that you can live, enjoy, look at the world differently, with different eyes. Have a relationship no longer burdened with fear, with jealousy, with despair,